Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're peeling back the layers on something that's always moving, always changing. Slang.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
It really is. It often gets dismissed as, just fleeting, maybe silly words. But the source material we've gathered for you, it shows it's actually, well, a highly structured, complex language mechanism.
Deeply tied into culture, social power.
And increasingly the pressures of digital technology. So our mission today is to move beyond just the surface level.
Right.
We want to understand the true social function of slang, where these words actually come from, and how the internet's speed is forcing language itself to adapt, like right now, in real time.
It's a constant evolution.
Exactly. And when most people think slang, they think bad language or maybe mistakes.
Pretty
Right?
common idea, yeah.
But the sources suggest its core importance isn't really about the literal meaning. It's the attitude it conveys and the social job it does.
That's the key distinction, really, the one we need to get straight from the start. Slang's primary importance is conveying attitude.
Like what? Disdain, coolness.
Yeah, or conformity, defiance, you name it, the literal meaning, often secondary. And crucially, it serves this profound social function, creating and reinforcing distinct in-groups and out-groups.
So basically telling you who belongs and who doesn't.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It cements that boundary. And historically, variations like slang and dialect, they're often dismissed by grammarians.
As just bad grammar.
Bad grammar, errors of the ignorant, that kind of thing. But that's, well, it's a false dichotomy, isn't it? Usually pushed by people trying to freeze language in place. Our sources remind us that correct or standard English, it's a construct. It's constantly borrowing words. Sometimes they're stolen, sometimes accidentally picked up from these very same incorrect dialects and communities.
The slang is kind of the engine of renewal for language.
You could definitely say that. It keeps things fresh.
Okay, so that engine has to start somewhere, right? Slang doesn't just pop up in the mainstream. It's born locally.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
Often as a deliberate way for specific communities to define themselves or maybe push back against the dominant culture.
The sources describe this as a kind of low-level guerrilla warfare.
Exactly. That's a great phrase for it. It's like a coded language designed to keep the mainstream, the dominant group, guessing.
If you know the term, you're in. If not,
You're the square. You're out.
So who are these linguistic guerrillas historically? Where did this stuff bubble up from?
Well, the sources point to a few consistent hotbeds. The military, especially during wartime, you get a lot of new terms there.
Makes sense. High pressure, tight groups.
Right. Then there's the criminal underworld. They develop these highly specialized codes known as canting,
To avoid detection, obviously.
of course. And definitely jazz musicians. Their whole culture, their music, it was inherently about pushing boundaries, innovation.
Okay. But if we're talking about today, contemporary American and even international English slang, who's the main driver?
Well, the sources are pretty consistent here. African Americans are cited again and again as the group that has influenced slang more than any other.
Really? More than any other single group.
Undeniably. They're the linguistic powerhouse, you could say, defining what's cool, what's modern.
That's a really crucial insight. Okay, so once these terms are created by that in-group, what happens next? How long do they last? Do they just go viral?
Well, it's not usually instant like an internet meme, though it's changing. But traditionally, it follows this predictable path, this sort of evolutionary cycle. And it's all driven by coolness.
Okay, the coolness factor.
It starts local, it develops, it survives within that group. Then it starts to spread into wider use. But here's the catch, the critical pivot. Once the word hits the mainstream, once it's widely adopted by the outgroups, the people who didn't invent it, it loses its specialness, its function.
And the original creators just drop it.
Often, yes. The moment a term becomes too widely used, it's basically dead to the group that invented it. It doesn't serve its purpose anymore.
Wow. Okay, example.
The perfect historical example is the word cool itself.
The actual word cool.
The actual word.
Yeah.
It started as slang in African American English. It only got accepted as standard English grammar way later, once its specific kind of radical origins were mostly forgotten.
So its history got erased for it to become mainstream?
Pretty much. This is what the sources call the hipster trajectory. It was considered hip one day becomes embarrassing or, square the next.
That trajectory thing, that it really highlights a huge cultural dynamic. You mentioned hipster.
Yeah, the word itself followed that path.
Originally, it meant like the sharpest bebop musicians in the late 40s. Like, super cutting edge.
The absolute definition of cool at the time. But look where it ended up.
Describing, well, kind of nerdy lifestyle stuff aimed at maybe Ivy League squares trying to look countercultural.
Exactly. Geek chic, almost. The meaning completely flipped as it got adopted by an outgroup that didn't share the original context or attitude.
Okay, this cycle creation, adoption, abandonment, that brings us right into now the modern era and the really tricky issue of appropriation, especially online.
Yeah, and this is where the speed of the internet just ramps everything up. It's high stakes now. Digital culture instantly broadcasts slang, right? But often, it's completely stripped bare of its original context. Its history, its specific meaning, gone.
And so you see a lot of linguistic borrowing, particularly from AAE, you mentioned.
A significant amount, yes, often without any real awareness of the source community's cultural background, their struggles, or even what the term really meant in its original setting.
Can you give us some solid examples, like from the last decade or so, where this happened fast?
Oh, absolutely. There are terms that just exploded. Take
OPP?
Yeah, it's a clipping, short for opponent or opposition. Now, that term came specifically from the Chicago gang scene, probably around the 2010s. It meant rivals, enemies, real-world danger attached. Now, you see it tossed around casually all over social media, totally removed from the violence and the actual stakes of where it was born.
Just becomes a generic term for someone you dislike online, maybe.
Kind of, yeah. Or think about Guyot.
Gyat. I've seen that one.
Derived from an exaggerated African-American English pronunciation of goddamn, often used online to comment on someone's appearance. Again, travels incredibly fast, loses its specific phonetic origin for many users.
And as these words spread like wildfire, the etymology, the real origin story just gets erased.
Completely erased for most people using it. The sources noted this loss of origin sometimes leaves people to even make up totally false histories for the word.
Like fake acronyms.
Acronyms. Exactly. Just to try and give the word some meaning in its new context-free environment, the word gets untethered from its cultural roots.
Floating freely in the vast, accelerated digital ether.
That's a good way to put it. And that ether, that digital environment, is the most dramatic factor shaping slang today. The internet hasn't just sped up the spread.
It's changing the rules.
It's introduced entirely new rules for how we use language. Rules governed by machines.
Okay, we definitely need to talk about that. Machines editing our vocabulary. What exactly is algospeak?
Right, algospeak. It refers to these communication styles that are uniquely shaped and frankly constrained by algorithms and platform filters.
Because platforms censor certain words.
Aggressively.
Yeah.
They censor or demonetize content based on specific keywords, often related to violence, sex, politics, self-harm, you name it. So users have to get creative. They invent euphemisms, coded words, to dodge the algorithmic detection. The goal is basically to talk clearly to other humans while being sort of invisible or opaque to the machine reading the text.
Wow, so it's like forced adaptation driven by fear of getting banned or having your stuff taken down.
Absolutely. It's linguistic self-defense against the machine.
What are some striking examples? You hear these terms sometimes.
The euphemisms can be quite jarring, actually, because they show how strict the filtering is. Key examples mentioned in the sources include things like using sewer slide instead of suicide.
Whoa, sewer slide.
Yeah. Or segs instead of sex. The way people communicate is governed less by grammar or social norms now and more by the machine's arbitrary rules of what's acceptable.
That's powerful. And kind of dark. A comment on online moderation, for sure.
It really is. And connected to that because everything online is pushed towards engagement, clicks, views. We see this related thing happening. Flanderization and brain rot.
Okay, Flanderization. Like Ned Flanders. How does that apply to language? Sounds like burnout.
That's a good way to think of it, linguistic burnout. Flanderization here means when, say, social media creators or influencers find a word or phrase that gets high engagement.
Gets lots of likes or share.
Exactly. So they exaggerate it. They overuse it, optimize it purely for that engagement treadmill. It might work for a bit, but it hyper-optimizes the term until it's just hollowed out.
Like a funny meme phrase that suddenly appears in every single comment thread.
Precisely. Until listeners just perceive it as meaningless noise, or, as it's often called now, brain rot vocabulary, it burns out incredibly fast, much faster than slang ever did before the internet.
So wait, if the moment a term hits the mainstream, it starts to lose its power, and the internet makes everything mainstream almost instantly. Does that mean the internet is just accelerating the death of every successful slang term?
In many ways, yeah, it feels like that. And this creates all these new tensions. Like on one side, you have this constant battle against fake language.
You mean like corporate slang?
Yeah, terms may be generated by marketing folks trying way too hard to sound cool. Remember normcore?
Oh yeah, that one felt forced.
Right. It gets instantly dismissed because it doesn't come from an authentic community. It lacks that real social function.
Okay, so that's one tension. What else?
Generational warfare.
Mhm.
The sheer speed of linguistic change online widens the gap between age groups dramatically.
Like parents not understanding their kids' texts.
That, but amplified. The sources mention younger groups like Gen Alpha will apparently ditch a niche word almost immediately if older generations, even millennials, start picking it up.
It's a linguistic arms race.
No,
Keep your language coded against your elders.
basically, yeah. And then there's also this risk of, maybe call it digital puritanism, where critics online quickly write off any genuinely new, inventive, maybe slightly edgy term as just meaningless internet slang,
Without understanding the context.
often without context, yeah. And that can stifle potentially interesting words, stop them from having a wider impact they might have had in a slower linguistic world.
We've talked a lot about the structure of the conflicts, but let's switch gears slightly. Music. The sources draw this really interesting, intimate connection between slang and musical forms.
Oh, yeah, it's a fascinating parallel because they share these fundamental aspects: rhythm, structure, established patterns or rules. And if you want a big picture example, the 12-bar blues structure. The sources consider that a perfect case of slang in music.
How does the 12-bar blues work as musical slang?
Well, think about how it started. Highly localized, deeply expressive, kind of revolutionary for its time. It was a cultural code, wasn't it? A way of communicating emotion, experience, maybe defiance, that existed way outside the established classical music traditions.
So it was its own language, using rhythm and harmony.
Defined by feeling, by attitude, not by academic rules. It conveyed immediate understanding within its in-group, the people who lived that experience.
So the feeling of the blues, that expressive energy, that's the attitude part of the musical slang.
Exactly right. And just like verbal slang, these musical slangs, these forms, they eventually get absorbed. They enter the realm of accepted grammar.
Like when blues scales or the 12-bar progression get taught in music lessons.
Precisely. It becomes codified. It's now musical grammar. But, and this is the cool part, the expressive energy, the slang element, it doesn't necessarily die. It just has the potential to be reactivated. When a new musician comes along and brings a fresh attitude and new perspective to those standard structures, they make it slang again.
That parallel is really powerful. Linguistic structure, musical structure. Linguistically, those short rhythmic bursts of language, prosodic phrases, they can work like riffs in music.
That's a great connection.
You even see it in songwriting history, right? Like Tin Pan Alley composers, they'd apparently find a catchy title idea, something with a natural rhythm or prosody.
And use that as the hook?
Yeah, as the springboard for the whole song's chorus. The rhythm of the words dictates the rhythm of the melody.
And you mentioned rock and roll earlier. The birth of that whole genre. It was described as a kind of contact language.
A contact language, like a pigeon.
Sort of, or like a kitchen language. Immediate, direct, full of slang. And written down often in just the shorthand of simple chord symbols anyone could pick up quickly.
Pure, accessible cultural slang made audible.
You got it.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground. Slang, ultimately, it seems defined by attitude and by social differentiation, creating that in-group, out-group line.
That's the core.
Mm-hmm.
And it follows this predictable but rapid cycle. Adoption, spread, abandonment.
And the internet has thrown gasoline on that fire. It's accelerated the spread massively.
While also throwing up new barriers, algorithmic censorship, algo-speak.
And driving internal conflict, like that generational language race. It makes the whole life cycle shorter, maybe more anxious, more frantic than ever.
Definitely more frantic.
So what does this all mean for you, listening? Well, you are right in the middle of this high-speed linguistic evolution. Language is this constant battleground, isn't it, between the mainstream and the cutting edge. Always dynamic, always shifting under our feet.
You're seeing it and probably using it every day.
So if the 12-bar blues started out as musical slang and eventually became standardized musical grammar, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Which of the digital slang words flying around today, the algo-speak like segs, the appropriated terms like op or yacht, which of these will eventually become just normal, standard English grammar, once their digital origins, their specific cultural context have completely faded away?
What's going to be the next cool that future generations just accept as normal, forgetting it was ever new or rebellious.
It makes you listen a bit differently, doesn't it?
We encourage you to listen closely to the words being invented all around you. They tell a story.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. 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 Catch you on the next deep dive.